Hello everyone. This session of the stopwatch application, we will be learning how to create this GUI. At this point, our focus is on simply getting the elements laid out in this fashion in this particular window. We will be discussing about three methods. That's initialize GUI, which in turn calls create display panel, which in turn calls create buttons panel. Let's go into idea and look into this and how we get this particular visualization. Let's go here. This is our stopwatch application, and let's get into the initialize GUI. So initialize GUI method starts with getting the content pane of the JFrame. So what we have here is the first, we have a JFrame. Let me just run this application so that it's going to be easier for us to understand this. So this is what we have, and okay, so what we are trying to do here is so the first thing that we did was, this is the window, we have the big window, and within that this is a panel that we have, content pane. Okay, so we want to get this content pane where we can add these labels and everything. So first we got that content plane, and then we set the whole thing into grid bag layout. Grid bag layout we have set, and we set the insets as 2 comma 2 comma 2 comma 2. That is the space that we will be giving 2 pixels of space everywhere. And then in the title, we created a variable called title, and we created a label, that is JLabel, an object of type JLabel, and added the title to this one. So that is why we are looking at stopwatch, and we have centered this to the center. We have centered this one, stopwatch. Then what we did was content.add title comma C. So when just creating a JLabel is not sufficient. This is an instance of the JLabel, so that's why we are just labeling it here. That is not just sufficient. We need to pick it up and add it to the panel. So our panel here is the content, that is the current panel. So unless you add it to the panel, it won't appear on the screen. So we have added it to the panel here, content.add title. Along with that, we are passing this constraints, grid bag constraints, so it is centered here. So we set swing constants.center, and based upon the constraints, this gets to this location. Then we have added the window listener, new confirm on close. So we already have discussed about this confirm on close, which is a window adapter class, so that if there are any window events, we should be able to handle those things too. So this is all part of initialization. Then what we did was, we in the row 1, as you see, it is grid y is 0. That's where we added the title, and then grid, and every time grid x is still 0. That is, we are starting to add everything at the beginning. Then we have at the row 1, we added a display panel. We just got, okay, get me the display panel, and whatever be it, the display panel, create display panel, we will add it in row 1, and then we created a buttons panel in the next one, and then added it to the row 2. Okay, and in all these cases, all we said was we want to add them, but we are going to just give only 2 pixels of space everywhere. That's all we said, and then we added them. So from our perspective, at the top we have a row representing the label, that is the stopwatch application title. Then we have a row for the display panel, and then we have a row here for the buttons. So create display panel is called, and the create buttons panel is called. Now let's look into a little bit more deeper, understand what is create display panel. Let's expand this and create display panel. Now for all practical purposes, now our display panel itself is a panel that we will be returning. If you look at this here, this panel is a new variable that we created of type JPanel, and then we created an object of type JPanel using new, and we are setting the layout within this JPanel to be again grid bag layout, we are creating grid back constraints with insets of 2, 2, 2, 2. And then what we did was we selected 3 labels: hours label, minutes label, and second label. Okay. Now we have hours, minutes, and seconds, and then all these 3 labels we wanted to be in the center. Okay. Now if you look at this one, hours, minutes, and seconds, we want it to be in the center, but there is something more to it that's going on. If you look at just this one, this is a panel of 2 rows and 3 columns. Okay, this panel is of 2 rows and 3 columns. So what we have done here is, after creating these labels here, at 0, 0, which is this one, we have added hours. Display panel dot add hours label, and then C we have passed it. And then what we did was minutes label, that is, we changed the grid X while Y is 0. Y is 0 means the row is still the 0th row, and our column changes to first column, that's where we have minutes, and then display panel dot add seconds label, and then that is at grid X 2. Now we change C dot grid X equals 2, that's why we have got the second column, which is technically third, because 0, 1, and second, that's where we have the seconds here. And then we created a hours field, which is a new text field, and then we went ahead and created a font. What we did was font, we wanted a big font. Look at this, this is a much larger font than ours or the title that we are looking at it. So what we did was, first we created a text field, and then we are deriving a font from the current text field, that is ours field dot get font gives us the current font of the text field, and then we are creating a new font which is plain, and then we are increasing it to 150. Okay, what we want is, from the base font we want to make it much larger, so anything higher than that number in the positive would give us a bigger number, so we made it big, 150. So with this, what happens is, we went ahead and hearts.field set font of big font. We created this field, and then we made this a big font, and then we set columns of 2. So when we set columns function, this is going to give us the 2-digit for counting, and then horizontal alignment also we set it, and then we set it to center. So within this value, whatever we put it, this will always be centered. Right? Now this is because jtextfield.center is the horizontal alignment for the hours field. Then what we did was, we created a minutes field. In the minutes field, we again created a new text field. This is for the new text field, and then we set it the font as big font, and we also set the columns to 2 and horizontal alignment to center. Then what we did was, we have hours field, minutes field, and the second field. All the 3 fields are created with a much larger font and 2 columns. Then we added them to c.gridx, which is at the 0th position, and see, this is the second row, that is the first row. 0th row is where we have hours, minutes, and seconds labels, and in the first row in Y column, first we added hours, and then we added minutes, and then we added seconds. So this is the column position. X is 0, and then X is 1, and X is 2. They are changing. Hence, we have got hours here, and then the minutes, and then the seconds. And then we are returning the display panel. As you have seen, the main application put all these things, this entire panel, into the second row. That's how we got the title. And then in the second row, we have a panel which in turn has 2 rows and then 3 columns. Now let's take a look at the buttons. Let's expand the create buttons panel. In the create buttons panel also, it's very similar. We have a buttons panel, and then we also have an action listener of type button actions. We haven't looked at the button actions listener. We will understand that later, but for now, all you know is buttons actions is an action listener. It extends action listener, and we have created an instance of that here. And every button that we create here, we will add this action listener, so that when we click on a button, this button actions class would be action performed method in the button actions class would be called. Now here what we did was, this is a JPanel, and then we went for a grid layout this time. In case of the grid layout, what we said was it is a 1 row but 3 columns we wanted. Okay, that's what we said. It is a grid layout of 1 columns and okay. Now I made it slightly bigger. That's good. One row and then 3 columns. First we created a start button and called it's a start button because a variable called start button we have declared as a class variable, and then we have new JButton. Using this we are creating a button and the label is start, and assigning it start button and setting the size to 10,60, where 10 is the height and width is 60. That's what we are trying to set here. And then we have set action command equals start. If you recollect well, this is when we are in the action performed method. When the button is clicked, we will get an action call to an action performed method. There we will get to know what is the action command. If there are multiple buttons that are calling the same action performed method, so we would be able to get to know which button is called, and based on that we would be able to take appropriate action. That is why we are assigning a command for each of these buttons. So start button.set action command is start, and then we are adding the action listener, that is the action listener that we created here, which is nothing but an instance of the button actions. Similarly, we have created the stop button and then the reset button. All we are trying to set here is the size, action command, and the action listener. And then we added buttons panel.add start button, stop button, and reset button. Note that since this is a grid layout, by default, the moment when you add the first one, it goes into the first column and first row. Next, it goes to the second column and then the first row. Next, it goes to the third column and the first row. That's why we just kept on adding in the grid layout, add. Now the start button, stop button, and reset button is the sequence we have added, and that is the sequence that they are appearing on the screen here. And then we return the buttons panel. So when we go to the top here, initialize method, we created the display panel and got it and added it to 0, 1. That is 0th column and the first row. And then we got the buttons panel and then added it to 0 column and the second row. Hence we have them here. Since all of them are centered, now they appear in the center of the rows. Stopwatch appears in the center of the row. This one also appears in the center of the row, and these buttons also appear at the center of the row. This is how we have created this GUI. Hope creation of this user interface is very clear. And if you have any questions, please go back and re-listen. And if you still have questions, maybe you should just try it out and you will get to it, and feel free to contact us. This is about creating a GUI for stopwatch application. In our next session, we will talk more about the functionality of what happens when we click on these buttons. Till then, thank you and have a good day.